when we talked about what is the vision and national service, I think it does not begin or should not begin at the high school level. I think it needs to go to the primary school level.
Leveraging and launching our creative industries in the country.
That's gotten mixed reviews.
Well, I think what got mixed reviews is not the concept, but the labeling.
What we do today will affect those coming after us.
Changes to the gaming legislation could be on the horizon. Guess what? We've got the latest crime stats. The back and forth between the government and the opposition over stem cell research continues, and an extra boost for organizations aimed at developing young Bahamians. Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Nakia DeVoe, and this is NV12. Cable 12 Studios. Changes to the gaming legislation could happen in the coming months, according to the Prime Minister, who told us today that since the Constitutional Commission weighed in on the issue, it is now time for Cabinet to consider the controversial matter. Christina McNeil tells us what the Prime Minister had to say about that and the meat of the constitutional referendum scheduled for later this year.
Prime Minister Perry Christie still unsure of exactly how many constitutional issues will appear on that constitutional referendum set for later this year. However, he says some issues, for example, the one regarding who is permitted to gamble in the Bahamas, may be decided outside a referendum setting. Constitutional Commission Chairman Sean McQueenie has stated that a simple amendment to the Lotteries and Gaming Act would make it legal for Bahamians to gamble in casinos or engage in any form of gambling. He explained that it was less of a constitutional issue and more or less something parliamentarians could change by repealing Section 50 of the Lotteries and Gaming Act, which restricts Bahamians. Christie says there is a contradiction in the law as he understands it.
Let me say that the law as it is now, as it has been interpreted for me, enables Bahamians who live abroad, who do not have the residency qualification, that is, they are unable to vote because they've been living abroad for some time, but they're still Bahamians. They can come into the casinos today and gamble lawfully. So there is a contradiction that you could go into a casino and see my daughter or someone like that, for example, gambling lawfully. Because the law only requires a residential sort of qualification.
Christie says there may be some issues the government and opposition agree on that may not cause them to include questions on a constitutional referendum. But when it comes to gaming, government will also have to consider the interests of casino operators in the Bahamas.
We had early indications from the opposition that there was agreement with recommendations made by the Constitutional Commission. If there was that and is that agreement, and when we meet with them that is evident, then we could decide together on what questions we will put to the people of the country. Is it simply to deal with the issue of gender equality, giving Bahamian women the same rights as Bahamian men, or will it be more? In their recommendations, they have made a request for the government to consider making it possible for permanent residents and people on work permit to game. And they say that when they have a famous entertainer, for example, who'd want to spend 50, 100,000 gaming, they are precluded, even though they've come in just for one performance, from gaming in the Bahamas. That's what they say. The government has to give consideration to that as a part of the overall package. It's in the process of doing so now because we know the casinos are anxious to have some movement on Parliament addressing the changes that are necessary to make us more competitive as a gaming jurisdiction.
Christie says the Cabinet will have to make the decision of whether or not an amendment will suffice to clearly define who can and cannot gamble in the Bahamas. The government has had that report in hand for just over a week now, but Christie says he expects there may be a slight delay in putting forth government's position on those recommendations.
We have a legislative agenda that we're battling through, and you could see now the NIGAD issue seems to have taken precedence over the actual legislation itself. So we have to deal with it.
Members of government are currently reviewing the Commission's nearly 250-page report, and Christie says once Cabinet discusses it, members of the opposition will also be consulted before bringing a position to the Bahamian people. Christie indicated that the outcome of that review may also lead to more referenda in the future.
To what extent will we be able to go to the people of the country with issues raised by the Commission, or will we be limited by good sense decisions just to a few of the recommendations on the basis that there will be additional referenda in the coming year, the year after, 2014.
For NB12, I'm Christina McNeil.
Well, you'll definitely want to hear this story. Overall crime is down 9% since the start of the year to July 11th. That's according to Minister of National Security Dr. Bernard Nottage, who made the revelation to NB12 today. During the same period last year, there were 6,131 reported cases of crime in all areas. This year, that amount has decreased to 5,594. Crimes against the person dropped from 1,002 reported cases last year to 996 cases this year. That's a 1% decrease. And for the first time in years, armed robberies are down, albeit by only 1%. Robberies are down by 2% as reported last week by NB12. Murder is down by 21% and attempted murders are down by 62%. Now, crimes against the property have also decreased overall by 10%, with 10% fewer burglaries, 23% fewer house breakings, 1% fewer shop breaking incidents, 5% fewer reported cases of stealing, 4% fewer incidents of stealing from vehicles, and 8% fewer reports of stolen vehicles compared to the same time last year. And get this, according to Bernard Nottage, the decrease in crime has everything to do with you, members of the public.
One of the reasons why we appear to have had this downturn in crimes in recent times has to do with cooperation from members of the public. And I have to really thank members of the public who seem now to be more willing to come forward, even if they don't reveal their identities, but to let you know what's going on in their communities. For example, when people hear gunshots now, or it may even be firecrackers that they think are gunshots, they tend to call the police, give information, and much of this information has been valuable. In the past few days, we've taken 6 guns off the streets. This is because people have called to say, I see someone here with a gun or whatever, and the police have been following them up and they've been able to take guns off the streets.
However, there were some increases in specific crimes so far this year. Attempted rape increased by 1,200% from 1 to 13. Unlawful sexual intercourse increased by 5% from 85 to 89. Now, statistics further show that manslaughter and rape recorded no change. Nottage said law enforcement officials intend to hold public consultation sometime next month to get the public's point of view on the current status of crime.
What I mean by that is we're going to open, myself and members of the law enforcement agencies are going to make ourselves available to the public. We want them to talk to us about what they feel about crime, about any ideas they may have about how we can deal with these crime issues.
Now on to news from Parliament. The debate over the stem cell research and therapy bill raging on in the House of Assembly today as members of Parliament once again defended the integrity of the Cabinet in bringing the matter to Parliament. MP for Marathon Jerome Fitzgerald says while much fuss has been made over whether or not the Christie administration was pressured to bring legislation to Parliament, the fact is that the matter resurfaced based on a contract issued by the Ingram administration.
The irony of it is, Mr. Speaker, is that this came before the Cabinet based on approvals that happened under their administration. Under their administration, the FNM administration, through an approval which was given to a company in Grand Bahama. That's how this came to us, Mr. Speaker. That is how it came to us. And that company, through their approval, had already commenced to spend millions of dollars in Grand Bahama.
MP for South Eleuthera Damien Gomez says Canadian fashion designer Peter Nygaard has expressed his personal interest in stem cell research and therapy, and if his investments in stem cell research elsewhere are any indication of what the Bahamas can expect if the legislation is passed, the people of Grand Bahama may have a lot to look forward to.
If he is prepared to spend $30 million in Freeport, Grand Bahama, in establishing a stem cell research facility, that is $30 million more than Grand Bahama currently has being invested in Grand Bahama. And those people who live in Grand Bahama, who are interested in the economic development and well-being of Grand Bahama, should welcome the regulatory framework.
However, opposition members of parliament contend that the Christie government has not been free from the influence of wealthy investors like Nygaard. This comes following a video in which several cabinet ministers appeared shortly after the last general election.
The word on the street is that Nygaard financed the PLP to the tune of $5 million. But after you see Nygaard takes the Bahamas back, you'd wonder whether that was all he donated.
Now, the Prime Minister has steered away from confirming or denying if Nygaard has donated to the Progressive Liberal Party, but Nygaard said he has donated to members of both parties. Parliamentarians hope to wrap up debate on the stem cell bill before the summer at the end of the month. But that's not how Deputy Leader of the Opposition Loretta Butler Turner sees it. She calls the video featuring the cabinet ministers an embarrassment to the nation. Butler Turner is questioning the governing party's ties with the Canadian millionaire, and she's now calling on the current administration to resign.
That we see numerous government ministers in this very same video that Nygaard speaks of taking the Bahamas back, toasting his victory, and the overlapping footage with the Prime Minister on election night last year. So the question arises, how far or how deep is Mr. Nygaard's influence over the current administration? While we welcome foreigners and we realize that, their investment dollars mean something to our economy, that does not buy them the ability to inject themselves into the everyday politics of our country.
And as for those defending Nygaard by pointing out his many philanthropic contributions to the country, Butler Turner says that is not the issue. She says she's more concerned about foreigners trying to insert themselves into the everyday business of the country.